The envelope was sitting on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. I already knew what it was. The return address was Heller and Crane, the law firm my mother had used since I was 11 years old. I kept walking past it. I kept making coffee and staring at it and leaving the room. Because on some level I understood that whatever was inside that envelope was the last answer to a question I'd been asking my entire adult life, and some part of me still wasn't sure I could survive hearing it. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known, was that the date stamped on the documents inside would be the detail that finally broke something open in me that I'd kept sealed for 23 years. My name is Claire. I'm 34. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, in a house on Ridgecrest Drive with blue shutters and a Japanese maple in the front yard that my father planted the year I was born. He died when I was 9. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and total, the way that kind always is. By the time I was 10, my mother, Donna, was dating a man named Marcus Hale. By the time I was 12, Marcus Hale lived in our house. And the Japanese maple my father planted was gone, dug up, Marcus said, because the roots were damaging the driveway. Marcus was never violent. I want to be precise about that, because when I try to explain what those years were like, people sometimes expect a different kind of story. There were no bruises. There was no locked basement. What there was, instead, was a daily, patient erosion. My younger brother Theo and I would come home from school, and whatever ease we'd had during the day, whatever lightness, would drain out of us the moment we turned onto Ridgecrest. The house had a feeling under Marcus. A pressure. He had opinions about how we spoke, how we laughed, how much food we took, whether our grades reflected sufficient effort, whether our friends were the right kind of people. He delivered these opinions quietly, at dinner, in the tone of a man who considered himself deeply reasonable. My mother sat at the end of the table and said nothing. That was the thing that took me years to name properly. It wasn't that she didn't see it. Donna Hale, she took his name in the spring of 1999, 8 months after they met, was not an oblivious woman. She was sharp and funny and capable of real warmth. I knew that warmth. I'd grown up inside it. But somewhere around the time Marcus moved in, she began a slow withdrawal from Theo and me that I can only describe as deliberate. Like she was deciding, one small increment at a time, where her loyalty lived. When I was 15, Marcus told me at dinner that I was becoming exactly the kind of girl nobody would want to be around. He said it calmly, while cutting his chicken. He said it because I had laughed too loudly at something Theo said. My mother looked at her plate. She did not look at me. I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and sat on the cold tile floor for 20 minutes. When I was 17, Theo stopped eating much. He got quiet in a way that scared me, not sad quiet, but gone quiet, the way a person gets when they've decided that taking up space is more trouble than it's worth. I told my mother I was worried about him. She told me I was being dramatic and that Marcus had been nothing but good to us, and maybe the problem was that I resented her happiness. That was the word she used. Happiness. Like a shield. I left for UNC Greensboro at 18 and I told myself I had survived. Theo left 2 years later. We didn't talk about Ridgecrest much. You don't, when you've both made it out of the same thing. You just try to keep moving. And then I found out. It was October 2021. Theo called me on a Tuesday night, his voice strange, and told me he'd run into a family friend, Janet Morse, who'd known our mother since before our father died, and Janet had mentioned, gently, carefully, the way people do when they're unsure whether you already know, that our mother had updated her estate documents the previous spring. I asked what that meant. There was a pause. Then Theo said, Marcus is the sole beneficiary. Everything. The house. The savings. All of it. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I didn't plan to. My legs just stopped. Because I needed to understand when. The date on those documents, the date stamped on the paperwork inside the Heller and Crane envelope I finally tore open 3 weeks later, was April 14, 2021. I have that date memorized. I will have it memorized until I die. Because April 14, 2021 was 6 weeks after the last time I had visited my mother. The last time I had sat at her kitchen table and tried, one more time, to tell her what those years had cost us. What they had cost Theo. She had listened with her hands folded and then told me I was choosing to live in the past, and that Marcus was her husband, and that she expected me to respect that. 6 weeks later she called her lawyer. I drove to Asheville on a Saturday in November. I didn't tell my mother I was coming. I didn't rehearse what I would say because I knew that if I rehearsed it, I would talk myself out of it, and I had been talking myself out of it for the better part of 2 decades. She opened the door in her bathrobe, coffee in hand, and the look on her face cycled through surprise and something like guilt before settling on something harder. Marcus was in the kitchen. I could hear the television. I told her I needed to talk to her alone. She let me in. I'll give her that. We sat in the living room, the same room where Marcus used to hold his quiet dinner table court, and I put the documents on the coffee table between us. I didn't yell. I had thought I would yell. Instead, I felt very calm and very tired and very young, somehow, all at the same time. I told her I knew. I told her I understood now that the choice she'd been making for 20 years had finally been written down in legal language. I told her that I wasn't there to contest it. I was there because she was my mother and I needed her to look me in the eye and tell me she understood what she'd allowed Marcus to do to us. She looked at the documents. She looked at her coffee cup. She said, very quietly, that Marcus had been good to her. That he'd been there. That Theo and I were adults who had our own lives and I didn't understand what it was like to be alone. I told her we were 13 and 11 when she married him. I told her we weren't adults then. I told her about Theo on the bathroom floor. I told her about sitting on the tile at 15 after the dinner where Marcus explained my personality to me like a diagnosis. I kept my voice even. I watched her face. And for one moment, just one, I saw something cross her expression that looked like grief. Real grief. The kind that means you know exactly what you did. Then Marcus appeared in the doorway. He asked if everything was all right. And my mother looked at him and then looked back at me and said, Claire was just leaving. I stood up. I left the documents on the table. I walked to my car and I sat in her driveway for 5 minutes and I looked at the spot where my father's Japanese maple used to be. Just concrete now. He'd paved over it. My mother called me 3 days later. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. She told me that what I had said was hurtful and unfair and that she and Marcus had discussed it and they felt it was best if I took some time away from contact with the family. She said Marcus had done nothing wrong. She said she hoped I would eventually find some peace. She has not called since. That was 14 months ago. Theo and I talk every Sunday. We order the same takeout from our respective cities, Thai, always, because it was the one thing Marcus wouldn't eat, so we never got it growing up, and we stay on the phone for 2, sometimes 3 hours. He's doing better now. He started therapy in 2020, and he says it's like learning to live inside your own body again after years of apologizing for taking up the space. I think about that envelope a lot. I think about the fact that she made that call to the lawyer before I ever showed up at her door. The confrontation didn't change her decision. The confrontation just made her say out loud what she'd already filed in writing. She didn't choose Marcus over us when I came to her that Saturday in November. She'd already chosen him. She just finally let me hear it. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for their parents to show up for them. I stopped waiting. That's not a happy ending. It's just the only honest one I had left.